12. Commissioner Shrum, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I can handle that.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Suzanne, will you go ahead and do the roll call of the commissioners, please?
Chairman McBeath.
Here.
Vice Chairman Robb.
Here.
Commissioner Drew. Here. Commissioner Howell.
Here.
Commissioner McBeath.
Here.
Commissioner Morai.
Here.
Commissioner Rain.
Here.
Commissioner Shrum.
Here.
Commissioner Wallace.
Here.
And can I have a roll call of the county advisory boards, please?
Glenn Bunch, Monroe County.
In Wellington, Elko.
Paul Dexter, Park.
Bill Young, Carson.
Mike Turnip, Pete Douglas.
Jason Lapp, Churchill.
John Reed, Washington.
MJ Line. Rex Flowers, Washoe. Tom Casanelli, Humboldt. Joe Grant, Virgin. Darrell Harwell, Washoe. Raymond Hodson, Eureka.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Okay, let's start off with agenda item number 11, member items, announcements, and correspondence. Commissioners may present emergent items. No action may be taken by the commission. Any item requiring commission action may be scheduled for a future commission agenda. Commission will review and may discuss correspondence sent or received by the commission since the last regular meeting and may provide copies for the exhibit file. Commissioners may provide hard copies of their correspondence for the written record. Correspondence sent or received by Secretary Mayer will also be discussed. Anybody have any member items they'd like to discuss? Commissioner Morai.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's come to the attention of the livestock industry through the Department of Ag that the Department of Wildlife has been doing some blood sampling and disease testing on mule deer. And I've spoken with members of the department, and maybe you could give us an explanation as to what's going on and where we may proceed with this measure.
Yeah, I'd be glad to. Ken Mayer, for the record, Director of the Nevada Department of Wildlife. In fact, we could schedule Dr. Wolf to come in and talk with the commission about this and an issue that's going over on the east side of the state. But BVD is it's considered by most veterinarians to have come from livestock, okay? But it's something that's easily treated in livestock herds through inoculation and whatnot. Because they're ungulates, both deer, sheep, and goats freely will be infected with BVD. What happened is we have high titers in both, all sheep, deer, and goats in the rubies. We're working with the #1 expert in the world on BVD back in Iowa. She spent her whole career working on BVD, and her assessment is that our titers are so high that there obviously is a situation where we've got an animal. Evidently, if a female cow gets BVD, they develop titers. They develop antibodies to it. They can pass it through their fetus and then into the fetus, and will not have any antibodies and will shed the virus continuously. And they call that a source. And the livestock industry is really keen on trying to find the source. And so that's kind of where we're at this point. We're working cooperatively with Ag, trying to identify where that source is. It could be within our wildlife populations. We don't know. We don't think so. But if we can identify the source from the livestock industry, they can control that much better. What do we do with the deer side of things, and sheep and goats? We're not quite sure at this point. We need to do some more testing. It can have, from the livestock industry perspective, it can lower your production, and we assume that it will do the same thing in deer. But we're kind of treading on new ground here. So we've been working very cooperatively with the livestock industry to try to get a handle on this, and we can let you know more as we find out more. But it could be a significant issue. We can find the animals that are shedding and get rid of them. Things might clear up. from our perspective, but we're going slow and holding hands through this process.
Okay, so, let's, do you have an idea of when you want to come back? Have Dr. Wolf come back?
I think what we could do is put it on the next agenda.
Okay,
And,
for May?
yeah.
Okay.
I think we'll know a heck of a lot more then. There is some new techniques now where, in fact, one of the researchers that's doing his work on this for the livestock industry is to come in and actually test water troughs. And so he's willing to come do that himself on his own nickel, because we got this situation. They're all watching it as very interesting. But I think by then we should know even more, and we can give a presentation then.
Okay, well then we'll go ahead and get that on the agenda for next May. Will that be all right, Commissioner Moray? Okay. Anybody else? Commissioner Howell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I got two things. On NRS 501.171 deals with the appointment and qualifications of member officers of the commission. And I noticed something. I was just reading this again. I've read it half a dozen times, especially when I first got on the board. And in 2010, with the new census, Washoe County qualified for 3 commissioners because they had over 400,000 with the new census. And I'm reading it now again, and somebody or somehow it got raised to 700,000, which puts Washoe County back to the possibility of 2 commissioners. I don't know when that happened. I never heard anything about it. And I've asked 3 other members, and nobody else ever heard anything about it. How's that possible we didn't hear about that? And I just want, not that it makes a whole hill of beans to me, but I just wondered why something like that seems important.
First time I've heard of it.
Well, it's right here.
Yeah.
Happened in the last legislature.
So it must have been an amendment that occurred. It was probably an amendment that was part of something else, and that part of it probably just wasn't on anybody's radar screen. So anyway.
The other question I had, does anybody on this board have the right to ask the Attorney General for a legal opinion?
I think the way the statute reads, it's the chairman of the commission that has that right.
I beg your pardon?
I said I think the way the statute is written, it's the chairman of the commission that has that right.
The chairman of the commission?
The chairman.
Oh.
Yeah. Is that?
Well, or you can take a vote, you can have the.
The entire commission can vote on it, so.
Oh, the entire commission has to vote on whether to ask for the legal opinion?
I think, see, this is, when we were dealing with this issue last August, September, the literal language, talks about that the chairman has that ability, but, in just understanding how a commission works, really no individual commissioner has the ability to, do, anything, unilaterally. And so we basically kind of took the position that it did require the full commission to act. So that was kind of our position. Have I kind of laid that out correctly?
Yeah, I think what happened was there was a request, and there was an opinion that came out of the Attorney General's office that said that it couldn't be just the chairman and that it had to be a vote of the entire board.
Okay, then, what I brought up yesterday about the possibility that the dream tag wasn't vetted, I hate to start something and then we get bad publicity, we did something that was wrong. It would seem to me like we should just vet it and see if it went through the Gaming Control Board, if they passed on it, and did it go through the proper channels. If it did, fine.
Yeah, I think the first step would be, and I almost hesitate to put anything. I don't know if we have enough time to deal with this particular issue on the May agenda, but maybe bring it back, in the June agenda, to have, to address, at least do some, get some information on this particular issue.
There's a couple of ways we can go about this. Ken Merritt for the record. To ask for an AG, you don't get that for free. So it's got to be, somebody's got to pay for it.
Yeah, and my point was going to be is that let's get information first, and then the
Yes.
second, if we deem it absolutely necessary, we can request an AG opinion.
And I can call Randy Stevenson at LCB, who was the attorney that worked on that, to try to get the background information on it. And we can do that easy enough, try to get him to send an email.
Okay. So I think before we do anything, or bring an agenda item to before the commission to decide whether to get an AG opinion, let's hear from LCB, because an article written by a single attorney in a publication, in my mind doesn't necessarily mean that's the that's just one attorney's opinion of the legal issue, and so I'd rather let's get some more information. And then, if we do believe that there's an issue, we can bring an agenda item before the commission and decide what we do. Does that sound good for you?
Gonna have to do.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, go ahead.
I was doing a little research while you were talking, and I can at least respond to Commissioner Howe's question about the population change. That was AB 545, passed in the last session. It was sort of a big bill that changed the population estimates throughout statutes. And raised that to $700,000. I just looked at it, or $700,000. Money on the brain. 700,000
I love
population. Having just looked at it, I assume the intent was to treat all the counties the same way, and it's just being updated for population growth, would be my guess.
Okay, Commissioner Schramm.
Mr. Chairman, for the record, I received some correspondence from Mrs. Betty J. Linnell, and she wants to know why the Department of Wildlife renewed the guide license for a person who had pled no contest to a plea bargain charge of unlawful contact with a child. I pulled it up on Google and pulled up all the information. I wondered if Chief Bonamici could go ahead and explain that.
I can take it. I can start. We actually looked at that situation. There are certain criteria in the law that we have to follow. In the judge's ruling, he made it very specific that this individual was not to lose his guide's license, and also he was not to be limited on his ability to possess and possess a firearm. And our rules, your rules, are that has to be violence included. There's some measures, and that didn't make those measures. That's why we didn't.
I read the ruling. He was allowed to keep firearms because of his job, but it still doesn't change the fact that it was a gross misdemeanor in the violation of NRS 207-260. And so I pulled up the whole thing because I was curious about it. It's all on Google, and it was in the Elko papers.
When he leans back, we can't hear. You should speak into the microphone, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You leaned back and it faded out.
Yep. Okay. Charlie's always on me about that anyway. Anyway, I got curious about it, so I pulled it up on Google and read the whole thing, and he plea bargained down to an unlawful contact with a child, and which is a gross misdemeanor. And I was curious about it, and so this woman wanted to know why the Department of Wildlife went ahead and renewed his license if he was in violation.
Commissioner Schramm, this is new for the record. I assisted Rob Bonamici with this, and a gross misdemeanor is not an automatic disqualification. It's a felony, and it wasn't a felony. It was a gross misdemeanor. And we looked at the other criteria, and we didn't feel that it fit under any of those other ones to disqualify him from renewal.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I just want to add that it would have probably, had the department moved forward and tried to remove his license, you would then at that point be in putting yourself in conflict with the judge and his specific ruling. And generally, if a judge has made that kind of a ruling, he's looked at the evidence, he's looked at the credibility of all the witnesses, and kind of made a determination, And so, for the department to make some unilateral decision on something like that would kind of fly in the face of the judiciary. And so I think that's a good judgment call to, take the judge's, advice and ruling. So, okay, any other member items?
Chairman McBeath, I meant to interrupt earlier when we were talking about the dream tag. Based on my cursory research yesterday, I do not believe the AG's office was involved in any way as far as passing that. And the way it is now, the legislature passed a statute, NDOW and the commission are both bound to follow it. And statutes are presumed constitutional until we get an adverse ruling. So for what it's worth, I don't know what the commission wants to do with that, but it is law. And the AG's office was not involved in the research and the propagation of that law.
Was not.
Was not based on my cursory research yesterday. Our office was not.
Okay.
So what you said, somebody would have to sue, would have to be found by a judge to be not constitutional, then
Correct.
we'd have to.
State law
move
is
forward.
presumed constitutional until we get an adverse ruling from the court. So until we do get a ruling deeming it unconstitutional, we are bound.
Okay, so am I reading what you're saying it would be pointless to go to the AG's office for an opinion?
I would leave that decision and that determination up
To the courts? Okay.
Get this advice all.
Sorry.
Chairman.
Yeah, Commissioner Drew.
Just a couple items. I'll follow on to the dream tag item. When Commissioner Howell was discussing this yesterday, it sounded to me like the opinion from the attorney that you were reading from was specific to the dream tag. Once we got the handout, it was pretty clear that this was an opinion piece that was actually written as far back as 2008. In my opinion, I think we're chasing a little bit of a ghost here. Another item that came to my attention through the email, and I think everyone on the commission got this, was in regards to bonus point carryover when an individual switches from a resident to a non-resident or the other way around. I've worked with Mr. Sefton on this particular individual's issue. When you change residency, you actually have to call the department to carry over your bonus points. I don't think it's something that maybe is advertised as well as it should be, and maybe warrants a closer look at a future commission. Maybe not May. I don't think it's going to make much of a difference by May. The tag will be, the drawing will be closed, but something we want to look at, see if we can clean that up. The other issue that came up, and maybe we can address this when we look at fishing regulations, but or I just need to be educated. There was an individual at the Douglas Cab who had a big sleepover with a bunch of his kids' friends, and he wanted to take the kids out fishing the next day. So he went to buy a license, but he didn't have all the kids that he was hosting. He didn't have their social security numbers, dates of birth, things like that. So his request was, is there some way we can look at streamlining that process? So maybe something we can talk about, like I said, when it's time to talk about fishing regs.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. Okay, any other commissioners with any other member items? I have one, and okay. The commission received a letter from Bevan Lister. Bevan is a former wildlife commissioner, represented farming, I believe, and he attended the Elko County Commission Symposium, which was this month, actually, March 5th. And he has written a letter, and I'm going to read it into the record, and then I'll indicate what I've done, and I'm sure that Commissioner Rain is going to have a comment as well after this. So anyway, it's addressed to me, and it says, "Dear Chairman McBeath and members of the Commission, please read this letter out loud and enter into the permanent record of the public meeting as public comment." On Monday, 5 March 2012, my wife and I traveled the nearly 300 miles from Pioche to Elko to attend a symposium on sage grouse in Nevada. There were a number of very interesting talks with various information and perspectives presented. Of particular interest was the presentation made by Commissioner Raines representing your board. I emphasize his representation of your board because he presented himself to the group as representing the Nevada Board of Wildlife Commissioners. Regrettably, Mr. Raines' comments had nothing to do with sage grouse or their management. He wasted over 20 minutes of my time bashing the Department of Wildlife and its director, Mr. Ken Mayer. It may or may not be that the Nevada Department of Wildlife has done all that it could do to stop the listing of the greater sage grouse in Nevada as an endangered species, but I don't think that an informational symposium is the place to air your grievances with the department. Since Mr. Raines introduced himself as a representative of the board, I can only deduce that it is the position of the board that Endow is inept and incompetent, and that Mr. Mayer is purposefully making every effort to see that the sage grouse does indeed become a listed federally managed species. I find it troubling that the board that has the charge to set direction and policy for a department would speak so negatively of that department. Are you charging the department with malfeasance of office? If so, why not bring formal charges and inquiries from the Attorney General's office? Are you folks trying to work together for the benefit of all of Nevada's wildlife, or are you simply making every effort to destroy each other? Are your petty differences more important than the great wildlife inheritance that the people of this state would like to continue to enjoy? I've spent a number of years serving on different boards and commissions. I was emphatically trained that I was never to speak in the name of the board unless I had been given specific authority by vote of the board to speak for the board on a specific limited subject. If Mr. Raines was speaking for the board, I find that appalling. I have not seen approval for his actions in your minutes. If he was not authorized to present his speech for the board, then sanctions and possibly even charges should be brought against Mr. Raines for abusing his office. As a sportsman and citizen of this great state, it is my hope that you, the men appointed to set the policy and give direction to the department, will focus on the needs of Nevada's wildlife and find a way to work with and guide the department in their appointed purpose. Sincerely, Bevan Lister. Okay, now we also got an email from Commissioner Raines, basically denying the assertions that were made by former Commissioner Lister. What I have done is I have asked our DAG to look into this issue and determine if there is any legal issue at all with respect to this action, in addition to this letter, I also got comments from members of our CABs with regard to this, and also got a tape of the actual speech of Commissioner Rain, and so I have forwarded that to our DAG to look at it, to see if there's anything that is at all actionable about it, and to report back. And so that's what I've done, and we'll wait and see what the findings are, and we'll just take it from there. Commissioner Rain.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's put this a little bit into context, but first, if one person knows that I was not speaking on behalf of the commission, it would probably be Mr. Lister, because Mr. Lister understands the situation, the process a lot better than any. And I was trying to think of any situation, and I can't come up with one. There may have been one back when I was chairman about something when we were representing a letter, but I can't recall one at the moment in which I've ever shown up and said, I am here representing Nevada Board of Wildlife Commissioners. By vote of the commission, they said that I could do this. That just doesn't happen unless I got a written document. The context of this situation, I did show up, I'll get into I'll say I did show up. I said, yes, I was a member of the board. That's it. I mentioned some past positions on the board, and I said past and prior. Those words would be right there if that's complete. Because fortunately, I was reading from a set of notes. I usually try to do that, which I have in front of me today. I was requested by Assemblyman Carpenter, been on Assembly for forever there, and a couple other people up there in Elko, to come up and speak about the sage grouse issue. He knows me, and we've discussed this. He was on the Mule Deer Committee. He knows the situation probably as well as anybody in the world. And it was introduced in the context specifically of sage grouse and what was happening. And it was introduced by one, the immediate context before that was some of the heritage projects that had come forth before this board, and what were the problems with getting them implemented? Were they heavily supported by the Department of Wildlife? Were there any problems with them? And the previous speaker was a Mr. Pat Laughlin, who set forth those items, and so some of it was directly addressing him. And, you know, of course, I was asked to commit the cardinal sin of politics, and that is telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and therefore I did so. Because truth is a very dangerous thing in politics. And, you know, so briefly, so you can see what he's talking, what the letter was referring to is I referred to the fact that, in my opinion, and I referred to, when you look at that, that probably says the, in my opinion, several times, that Department of Wildlife is not doing all it can do. And in fact, it is obstructing many times, such as, in direct reference to those heritage projects, they recommended against them. We were wrong in approving them, and that's fairly obvious. That's in every minutes we've ever had. You know, department did not want that to happen, and that was a lot of the context of it. However, I went on to speak about things that, in my opinion, that despite the fact that Department of Wildlife says that they want to help out the sage grouse population, that the direct actions in many cases do not follow that out, and that we've instituted basically no programs that will have a positive effect on the population of sage grouse, and in fact that many of the programs put into place will undoubtedly have a negative impact. And this was basically, almost every speaker there was in unanimity. If you discount some of the, I mean, there was some things that were kind of off the subject of the rest of the speakers, like the BLM and the Forest Service. They had their own things they're talking about. But basically every speaker that was there, vast majority of them, talked about, you know, sage grouse issue, and hey, we need to have more predation control. We need to return the land. The sage grouse population boom was brought about historically by increases in ranching, who developed the water sources, developed the hay meadows, didn't previously exist. And that is the context of which I was talking about. And specifically that the department delayed, stopped, killed, and tried to kill the funding for these projects. It was, you know, it took forever to get through the Board of Examiners. That the science behind some of that just does not ring true to me at all. And that basically the vast majority of the funding is spent on studies that are studies and studies. And I talked to all these retired NDOW people, and they say, yeah, back 30 years ago, I was working on a sage grouse study. And yeah, I worked on one. We finished the study. And if all we're doing is spending money on studies, which is the vast majority of the funding that is being spent, yes, we're fighting it, we're studying it, then that will not ever accomplish anything. And the people there who I was asked to speak to, well, who we talked to? Mostly ranching and mining people in this context. Hey, you are the people that are going to suffer. Me personally, I'm, you know, sportsmen, yeah, we're going to suffer to some degree. The people that are going to suffer their livelihoods and are truly in danger from this are the ranchers and they are the miners. They're going to lose their livelihoods just because we're sitting here studying an issue to death. And Mr. Lister did not necessarily like that. We've had some arguments in the past about those, I'd call them arguments, discussions in those past when he was on the commission. I was on the commission with him for 1 year here, along with Mr. Robb and Commissioner McBeath. And so, you know, and so it was basically that type of a discussion that went on. But at no point in time, I didn't speak for the commission. You know I don't speak for the commission. Nobody here. I speak for one person, and that's me. Yes, I represent sportsmen. Who does that mean I speak for? Me. You know? Yeah, then that's basically it.
Okay, well, you know, that, you know, we'll, I think when we got a tape and we got, obviously other people have, you know, former commissioners.
The commissioners were there, previous commissioners were there.
So anyway,
ones,
we'll let our DAG look at it, and she'll make the determination whether we need to do anything. And
if she'd like to speak to me about it, I'd be more than happy to.
Okay.
Be in consultation.
Okay. Any other member items from commissioners? Okay, let's move on.